I stared at the screen, my coffee long gone cold as the words blurred before me. My only child, married in Lake Como. Her smile gleamed beneath the Italian sun, her veil caught mid-laughter beside a man I'd never met. No call, no invitation, no explanation. Just hashtags and champagne flutes raised to a future I wasn't invited to. After raising her alone, after building a home from debt and grit, I wasn't a mother anymore. Just another stranger she cropped out of the frame. Before we begin, may I ask, where in this big, beautiful world are you listening from? It's always a quiet honor to know who's sharing this space. Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The morning light bled through the gauzy curtains of Janice Holloway's modest living room, pooling gold across her worn oak floors. She'd been awake since dawn, coffee gone cold beside her laptop, cursor blinking on the Facebook search bar like a heartbeat she couldn't ignore. She shouldn't have looked. She knew that. But temptation had its own gravity, one stronger than dignity. And there it was. Emily Holloway Walker. Hundreds of photos, perfectly filtered, tagged and shared. Her daughter in a backless satin gown, sun spilling over the cliffs of Lake Como. The groom, Derek Walker, was beaming, champagne flute in hand, the kind of man who posed like he was waiting for applause. There were friends, bridesmaids, hashtags. Walker, ever after. Italy I do. Luxury love. No call. No invitation. No explanation. Janice's hand trembled as she scrolled, watching her only child smile in a world she wasn't meant to see. Her throat tightened, her vision blurred at the edges. She whispered to no one, "I raised you better than this." A knock startled her. "Morning," came Sharon Dillard's cheerful voice as she stepped inside, jangling a ring of keys. "Brought the set for the beach house. Pre-summer maintenance, remember?" Janice shut the laptop quickly, as if closing a wound. "Thanks. Sorry, I was just distracted." Sharon, in her coral windbreaker and bold red lipstick, caught the flicker of pain in Janice's eyes. "You looked like you saw a ghost." "Something like that," Janice murmured, forcing a smile. Sharon dropped the keys onto the counter with a clink. "You still planning to head down there this weekend? The salt air will do you good." "Maybe." Janice sipped the dregs of her coffee, the bitterness grounding her. "Maybe I'll go tomorrow." When Sharon left, the silence of the house grew heavy again, like fog pressing against the windows. Janice tried to distract herself by folding laundry, by watering plants, by doing anything that didn't involve thinking about Italy. But grief has a way of finding its seat at the table. By afternoon, her phone buzzed. A text. "Emily, can we use the beach house for our honeymoon? Derek wants beach pics. It's perfect for the aesthetic." Janice read the words twice, then again. Her hands went cold. That house, her house, wasn't a prop for their picture-perfect lives. It was her sanctuary. The one thing she'd built after losing everything: her husband, her savings, her sense of belonging. That cottage on the Outer Banks had seen her through hurricanes and heartbreaks alike. She typed a reply, then deleted it, typed again, deleted. Finally, she set the phone down and walked to the window. Outside, gulls wheeled over the gray-blue horizon. The air smelled faintly of rain and brine, the kind of scent that carried memory like salt carried sting. She could almost see Emily as a child again, hair tangled from the wind, collecting seashells, laughing as waves chased her ankles. The sound of it echoed faintly in her chest, then faded, replaced by the hollow click of another notification. Another tag, another photo, another reminder of everything she'd been written out of. Janice picked up her phone, thumb hovering over the keyboard. "Of course, sweetheart. Anything for you." That's what she would have written once. Before the lies, before the distance, before being reduced to an inconvenience on the other end of a text message. Instead, she wrote, "Let me think about it," and hit send. The words glowed on the screen, calm, restrained, deceptively neutral. But beneath them, something dark and deliberate began to stir. Janice set the phone down with precision, like placing the first chess piece of a long, silent game. She walked to the kitchen window and watched the horizon again, waves curling and breaking in the distance, relentless and rhythmic. The sea had always been honest, even when people weren't. She took a deep breath, exhaled slowly, and whispered to herself, "Let her think I'm still the woman who says yes." The clock ticked softly. Outside, a storm was gathering offshore, thin lightning flickering against the dusk. Janice didn't know what she'd do yet. But she knew one thing for certain. Whatever came next, it wouldn't be forgiveness. The following morning broke in soft blue layers, the kind of dawn that made the ocean look forgiving. Janice loaded the last of her canvas bags into her aging Subaru, the familiar rattle of the tailgate oddly comforting. She hadn't been down to the beach house since winter, but today felt different, purposeful. By the time she crossed the Wright Memorial Bridge into the Outer Banks, sunlight was spilling across the dunes, the world washed clean in the glow of early summer. Seagulls swooped over parked trucks at the bait shop. A pair of kids ran barefoot across the sand road, their laughter trailing behind like ribbon. The sight might have once made her ache. Today, it just reminded her that she was still alive, still moving forward, even if it meant driving straight into the wreckage her daughter had made of love. The cottage came into view. Pale blue siding, white shutters, the porch still wrapped in wind chimes and beach grass. Janice exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. When she stepped inside, the air smelled faintly of lemon polish and sea salt, the same scent her mother used when they'd built the place board by board. Light streamed through the front windows, dappling the woven rugs and driftwood frames. It was perfect, pristine, peaceful, exactly how she liked it. She traced a hand along the kitchen counter, polished smooth from years of use. The thought of Emily and Derek lounging here, treating it like a backdrop for their curated coastal aesthetic, made her stomach twist. They didn't deserve this quiet, this peace, this proof that home could still be honest. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She didn't even need to look. Derek. "Hey, just checking. You'll stock the place with champagne, right? Emily's favorite brand's Dom Perignon. Don't want her disappointed on her honeymoon." Janice stared at the message, a bitter laugh bubbling up from somewhere deep. "Champagne," she muttered, shaking her head. God forbid she drink something that doesn't sparkle. She deleted the text and opened her desk drawer instead, the one that held old address books, faded ink, a paper map of the coast. She flipped through the pages until she found a name she hadn't read in years, Marco Serrano. Nickname written beside it in parentheses, Clutch. They'd met when she'd still been designing interiors part-time, volunteering for a legal aid clinic in town. His teenage daughter had nearly been taken away after his ex's lawyer painted him as unstable. Janice had testified to his steady work ethic and kind heart. The judge had listened. The case had turned. Clutch had promised, "If you ever need me, I'm a phone call away." That had been 7 years ago. Janice pulled out her phone, fingers hovering over the keypad. It felt absurd at first, like resurrecting a favor from another lifetime. But then she looked around at her spotless, sunlit sanctuary and thought of Emily's text again. Perfect for the aesthetic. The words burned. She typed a short message. "Janice. Hey, Clutch. It's Janice Holloway. Remember me?" The reply came within minutes. Clutch. "Of course I do. How's the queen of coastal chic?" Her lips curved. He'd always been that mix of rough edges and warm humor. Janice. "Got a weird question. You and your crew still do those charity rides?" Clutch. "Every spring. Why? Janice. I've got a beachfront place sitting empty next week. Thought some good folks might like a few days of rest on the house. There was a pause, just long enough for her heart to thump once, twice. Then his reply lit the screen. Clutch. You serious? Hell yes. You're an angel, Janice. She smiled. Not angelic, not even close, but it felt good to be seen as something other than expendable. Outside, the tide was rolling in, the surf foaming high and white against the shore. She stepped onto the porch, wind whipping her hair. Somewhere in the distance, thunder murmured, a leftover from last night's storm, fading out to sea. Janice leaned on the railing, watching a line of bikers roar down the coastal road, their engines rumbling like the earth clearing its throat. For the first time in months, she didn't feel powerless. She felt precise. The phone buzzed again. Another message from Derek blinked on the screen. Derek. Just checking. You got my champagne note, right? Janice deleted it without a second thought. Then she opened her contact list again. There were more names. More people who'd been kind or grateful or quietly loyal. People who remembered her as more than Emily's mom. The wind caught the screen door and slammed it shut behind her, the sound sharp and final. Janice turned toward the ocean and whispered, "Let's see who the house belongs to now." The horizon glittered, endless and defiant. By midweek, the plan was in motion. Janice sat across from Sharon Dillard in the small, cluttered office above the real estate agency. The place smelled faintly of printer ink and coconut air freshener. Sharon's glasses sat low on her nose as she clicked through the rental portal. "So," Sharon said, squinting at the screen, "you're telling me to list your beach house for a private booking but not under your name, correct?" "That's right," Janice said. "Private, direct payment. No questions asked." Sharon arched a brow. "Sounds like my kind of client." A faint smile tugged at Janice's lips. "They're good people. Motorcycles, not mischief." "Ha," Sharon snorted. "Those two things aren't always exclusive." "Trust me," Janice replied. "This time, they are." She watched as Sharon filled in the details. Charity ride coastal retreat. Private group stay, 5 nights, paid in full. When the confirmation pinged, the total hit the screen. Clutch had paid the full amount, plus a generous deposit. Sharon whistled. "Well, someone's eager." Janice leaned back in her chair, a strange calm threading through her chest. "He said they needed a place to unwind after their ride. I told him mine could use a little life." Sharon turned toward her. "You sure you're okay with this, honey? After, you know." "I'm fine," Janice said softly. "It's just a house." But they both knew it wasn't just a house. 2 days later, Janice drove down again, this time with her car full of groceries and supplies that made her laugh out loud at the thought of Emily's reaction. She unloaded ribs, brisket, hot sauce, and 3 cases of beer, none of it artisanal or imported. She even tossed in a few bottles of root beer for the designated drivers. The fridge filled with ordinary, hearty things that smelled like summer cookouts and honest work. On the counter, she arranged paper plates instead of china, a stack of checkered napkins, and a bowl of peanuts. She found an old Bluetooth speaker and queued up a country playlist. Then, in the linen closet, she replaced her monogrammed guest towels with a dozen thick, fluffy ones from a discount store. She added a basket of earplugs, sunscreen, and barbecue sauce packets. An oddly practical welcome kit that made her grin. By the time the sun began to dip, the place looked like something between a biker hangout and a cozy roadside inn. Outside, she hung a hand-painted sign over the patio. "Welcome, riders." She stepped back, brushed a smear of paint from her wrist, and admired the crooked charm of it. It wasn't perfect, but that was the point. A breeze swept in from the water, carrying the scent of charcoal and ocean spray. Janice could almost picture them arriving, the rumble of bikes, the laughter, the easy camaraderie she hadn't felt in years. She imagined Emily walking into this scene instead of her own fantasy honeymoon backdrop, the look on her daughter's face when she realized the perfect aesthetic had been rented out to a motorcycle club. It wasn't cruelty that filled Janice. It was clarity. She'd given enough of herself to people who thought her love was theirs to command. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She wiped her hands on a rag, still smiling faintly, and unlocked the screen. Emily. We'll be there Thursday. Can you make sure the house is ready? Derek wants to bring a drone for some aerial shots. Janice froze. For a heartbeat. Everything went quiet except the rhythmic crash of waves against the shore. She read the text again, slow and steady. Thursday. 2 days from now. The timing couldn't have been tighter. Her thumb hovered over the reply button, but she didn't type anything. Not a word. Instead, she opened her messages to Clutch. Janice. The house is yours starting Thursday. Make yourselves at home. The reply came seconds later. Clutch. You got it. We'll treat her right. Janice stood there in the fading light, the sound of gulls overhead, and something fierce and quiet moved inside her chest. A satisfaction that wasn't joy, wasn't spite, but something far steadier. She looked out over the darkening ocean, where the horizon was bleeding into night, and whispered to herself, "Let's see whose pictures get taken first." The first stars flickered above the dunes, the tide rising fast and full. The game had officially begun. The first call came just after noon. Janice was pruning the rosemary bush outside her porch when her phone started buzzing, the sound sharp and insistent against the ocean wind. She glanced at the screen and froze. Emily. She hadn't seen that name light up in 6 months. For a moment, Janice just stared at it, thumb hovering over decline. Then she exhaled slowly and swiped, accept. Hello? The pause on the other end was charged, brittle. Then came her daughter's voice, cold, trembling with fury. Are you out of your mind? Janice blinked, the sunlight catching in her hair. Good afternoon to you too, Emily. Don't you good afternoon me, Emily snapped. What did you do? We just got to the beach and there are... Her voice cracked in disbelief. Motorcycles in the driveway, there's smoke everywhere, and these men are grilling in the yard. Mom, what the hell is this? Janice let the words settle. The corners of her mouth twitched. Oh, I'm sorry, honey. The house is rented out this week. You rented it out? To them? Emily's voice pitched high, nearly hysterical. Are you being serious right now? You know we planned our honeymoon here. Derek already hired a photographer. Well, Janice said evenly, maybe you should have mentioned that before you booked your flight to Italy without telling me. There was a stunned silence. Then came the eruption. You're petty, Emily screamed. You're selfish and mentally unwell. Who does this to their own daughter? Janice's voice didn't waver. It's my home, Emily, not a backdrop. Static filled the line for a moment. Then Derek's voice cut in. Smooth, confident, dripping with condescension. Janice, this is ridiculous. You can't just rent out property that we're entitled to use as family. We'll take this to court if we have to. Janice's laugh was quiet and incredulous. Entitled? You didn't even invite me to your wedding, Derek. What part of that makes me family? He scoffed. You're going to regret this. I doubt it. Janice hung up before he could say another word. The air around her felt sharper now, cleaner. The wind tugged at her hair as if to cool the faint burn in her cheeks. Her hands were trembling, not from fear, but from something closer to exhilaration. A few minutes later, Sharon's number flashed on her phone. Sweetheart, Sharon said the moment Janice picked up, her voice low and amused. I just got a call from a very angry young woman who claims I'm helping you commit some sort of real estate crime. Janice smirked. Let me guess. Emily? Bingo. Sharon's chuckle was almost a purr. She threatened to sue me, said her lawyer husband is filing an injunction. Let them file whatever they want, Janice said calmly. They never had a lease, just expectations. That's what I told her. Sharon's tone softened. You doing okay? I'm better than okay, Janice said, looking out toward the dunes. For the first time, I'm not apologizing for taking up space. Good, Sharon said. Then let them stew in their entitlement. I'll keep everything buttoned up legally. You just enjoy the show. After the call ended, Janice wandered back into the house, phone still in hand. Her text notifications buzzed in a relentless rhythm, one from Emily, one from Derek, alternating like artillery fire. You humiliated me. We're talking to an attorney. You're sick. You'll regret this. She scrolled through them, unreadable, then finally pressed block. Outside, the world went back to its quiet rhythm, waves crashing, wind chimes tinkling, the faint hum of motorcycle engines down the coast road. A new message blinked across her screen, from an unknown number at first. Then she recognized the name. Clutch. Got settled in, Janice. Hope you don't mind, we fired up the grill. You wouldn't believe this sunset. Sending you a pic. A photo appeared. A group of bikers laughing around a grill, the horizon blazing orange behind them, smoke rising into the evening air. They looked alive, content, completely unbothered. Janice stared at the photo for a long moment, the faintest smile touching her lips. Her chest ached. Not from sadness, but something almost like freedom. The phone buzzed again. Another photo. This time, a selfie of Clutch holding up a rib, grinning like a kid at a carnival. The caption read, "Best ribs on the coast. You're a legend." Janice laughed softly, shaking her head. Not quite, she murmured, just finally learning who deserves a key. She set the phone down, stepped onto the porch, and watched the sunset stretch long and gold across the waves. The smell of grilled meat carried faintly through the salt air, mingling with the sound of distant engines. It was beautiful, ordinary, unmistakably hers. Then, from inside the house, her landline began to ring. Not her cell. The landline. The one only family ever used. The smile faded. She turned toward the sound, the sky darkening behind her. It rang again, slow, deliberate, insistent. Janice took one breath, steady and measured. Then another. She reached for the receiver. The landline still hummed in her ear when the voice came through. Steady, male, professional. Mrs. Holloway? This is Neil Lawson. Sharon gave me your number. Thought we should talk before things get noisy. Janice blinked, tension easing a little. Ah, the surfer lawyer. A low chuckle. Guilty. Come by tomorrow. I'm right on the boardwalk. Blue and white office next to the bait shop. When he hung up, the receiver felt warm in her hand. For the first time since Emily's call, she felt anchored, someone competent on her side. The next morning, sunlight flashed off the hood of her car as she pulled into the narrow gravel lot behind Neil Lawson and Associates. His office looked nothing like the glass-walled firms Derek bragged about. It was a renovated cottage, windows open to the sea breeze, law books sharing shelves with surf trophies and a weathered longboard mounted above the door. Neil himself looked the part, tan skin, sleeves rolled to the elbows, a silver watch glinting against sun-browned arms. Mrs. Holloway, he greeted, offering her coffee from a chipped mug that read, "Legal Wave Riders. Let's make sure your daughter's husband doesn't try to surf off with your deed." Janice managed a wry smile and opened her tote. Here's everything. Title documents, tax receipts, the paid-off mortgage, insurance statements. I even brought utility bills, just in case he claims residency. Neil whistled softly as she spread the papers across his desk, neat as a dealer laying out cards. He scanned through them, lips curving in approval. "Well, you've got everything but the original hammer that built the place," he said. "They've got nothing." Janice exhaled. The words sounded better than coffee ever could. "Can they really do anything?" she asked. He shook his head. "Not legally. Entitlement isn't ownership. But people like your son-in-law thrive on bluffing. Expect noise, threats, maybe a strongly worded letter." As if on cue, her phone buzzed. A new email from Derek Walker. Subject line, "Formal notice of intent." Janice clicked it open. The letterhead looked self-important, like a college assignment dressed up as litigation. Emotional distress caused by willful interference with marital property, it claimed. Demand for compensatory damages, $25,000. Neil read over her shoulder and snorted. "Emotional damages? For not getting to pose in front of your beach house? Tell him to invoice the Atlantic." Janice laughed for the first time in days, an unguarded, genuine sound that startled even her. "I think I'll file it somewhere appropriate," she said, slipping the printout into her wastebasket. Neil leaned back, tapping a pen against his chin. "You've got grit, Mrs. Holloway. I see a lot of folks break under family pressure." "Lost that luxury a long time ago," she said quietly. For a moment, neither spoke. Outside, the crash of waves filled the pause. Finally, Neil gathered her papers into a tidy stack. "I'll keep digital copies on file in case Derek tries to stir the county clerk's office. Bureaucrats spook easy." Janice nodded. "Good. I'd like to stay a few steps ahead of them this time." That afternoon, as she walked the boardwalk with a paper cup of chowder, her phone vibrated again. Social media alerts. Emily's posts. A series of cryptic captions scrolled past her screen. "Toxic people wear pearls and smile. Blood doesn't guarantee loyalty. When mothers destroy happiness, karma handles the rest." Each one framed with soft focus honeymoon photos that weren't even hers, the stolen aesthetic of strangers. Janice shook her head, thumb hovering over mute. But instead she simply let the phone dim and tucked it into her pocket. The ocean was louder, steadier. Back at home, the evening stretched quiet and golden. She poured herself a glass of iced tea, stacked the remaining paperwork in a labeled folder, "House, proof of ownership," and felt an unfamiliar lightness in her chest. She was halfway through watering her porch plants when her phone buzzed again. "Neil Lawson. You still up? Need to show you something odd." "Curious," she called. "What's wrong?" "I ran your parcel number through the county database to confirm it's clean," he said. The sound of waves was faint behind his voice. "Found a secondary claim filed last month. Same address, different name." Her heartbeat quickened. "Different name?" "Yeah." Papers rustled. "Filed under Emily Walker, your daughter. Lists her as partial owner. Signature dated 3 weeks before the wedding." Janice's stomach went cold. "That's impossible." "I thought so too." Neil's voice hardened. "Except the signature looks a lot like yours." The porch light flickered in the breeze, casting long shadows across the deck. Janice set the watering can down, knuckles white on the handle. "You mean she forged it," Neil said quietly. "And if the county clerk hadn't flagged the mismatch, she might have gotten away with it." The wind rattled the chimes above her, a sudden metallic cry against the silence. Janice pressed a hand to her chest, breath steady but shallow. Somewhere down the coast, thunder rolled over the horizon, dark and distant. Neil's voice came through softer now. "I'll handle it. We'll make this right." Janice looked out over the black water, her reflection faint in the sliding glass door. "Don't worry," she said, voice low and calm. "I'm not afraid of storms anymore." Lightning flashed across the waves, bright and brief. The battle had just changed shape. The morning after Neil's call broke bright and windless, the ocean unnervingly calm, like it was holding its breath for what came next. Janice parked in front of the county records office, a squat brick building that always smelled faintly of mildew and bureaucracy. Neil was already waiting outside, sleeves rolled, legal folder tucked under one arm. His easy grin had been replaced by something sharper. "They opened early for us," he said. "Guess even civil servants love a forgery scandal." Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed. The clerk, an older woman with pastel nails and the distracted patience of someone who'd seen everything, slid the disputed filing across the counter. Janice stared at it. Her own name scrawled at the bottom in a loop that was almost right. Almost. She felt a strange detachment looking at it, like she was observing a crime scene from behind glass. "She practiced this," Janice murmured. "Probably more than once." Neil nodded grimly. "The county flagged it when the signature didn't match the deed authentication. Lucky catch. I've already filed to have it locked and archived under fraud investigation." Janice inhaled deeply, steadying her voice. "Let's make it official." The process took hours. Forms, signatures, witness initials, digital scans. At one point, Neil guided her hand gently toward a line she'd missed. "You're building a record," he said quietly. "And that record's going to outlast whatever tantrum your daughter throws next." When it was finally done, the clerk stapled the paperwork, stamped it, "Fraud complaint received, active review," and handed Janice a copy. Walking out into the afternoon sun, Janice felt oddly hollow, not triumphant, but emptied of something heavy she'd carried too long. She really thought she could take it, she said softly. Neil glanced over, pulling on his sunglasses. "Not take it, steal it. Big difference." Janice managed a faint, humorless smile. "Stealing runs in the family, I guess. I used to steal peace from myself to keep her happy." He gave her a long, thoughtful look, but didn't answer. That evening, Janice called Sharon. "Make the house unavailable," she said. "For the summer?" "For the year." Sharon didn't even ask why. "You got it. I'll mark it long-term unavailable, close the listing, let them choke on it if they try to book again." Janice could hear typing on the other end, decisive final keystrokes that felt like locks turning. "Done," Sharon said. "You want me to bring over the physical key copy tomorrow?" Janice hesitated. "No. Leave it with me. I like knowing who has access." Later that night, Clutch texted a photo of the porch lights glowing against the dark surf. "House looks beautiful. Crew left it spotless. Let us know if anything needs fixing. Hell, we'll repaint the whole deck if you want." Janice smiled, her heart warming despite the chill seeping through the glass panes. "You've done enough, Clutch. The house feels alive again." "Alive's good," he wrote back. "Alive means it's yours." She read the message twice, then set her phone down on the coffee table beside her glass of tea. The surf outside sounded like applause fading into night. 2 days passed before the next message came, from Emily. It wasn't a text. It was a voice memo. Janice hesitated before pressing play. The timestamp read 1:42 a.m. Emily's voice began soft, practiced, the kind of tone she used when performing sincerity. "Mom, I think we both said things we didn't mean. I didn't really try to take your house. It was Derek's idea, and it got complicated. You know how these filings work, right? It was just paperwork, not serious." Janice sat on the edge of her bed, the sound of rain brushing the windows. Emily continued, her words quickening, desperate now. "You've always misunderstood me. You twist everything into an attack. I didn't mean to hurt you, but you push people away. You make it impossible to love you." There it was. The old guilt, polished and weaponized. Janice's finger hovered over pause, But she didn't need to hear the rest. She already knew how it ended. "I'm sorry, but you made me do this." Her thumb pressed delete. The screen went blank. Silence returned, deep and complete. She walked to the window. The sea beyond was black and endless, reflecting the faint shimmer of the porch light. Somewhere down the coast, thunder rumbled again, softer this time, as if the storm itself was backing off. For the first time in her life, Janice didn't chase reconciliation. She didn't explain or justify or pick through the ruins of what they used to be. She just stood there, listening to the rhythm of waves striking shore, a sound that belonged only to her. Then, behind her, the landline began to ring again. Janice turned slowly toward it, her reflection caught in the dark glass of the window. This time, she didn't rush to answer. She let it ring once, twice, 3 times. Then she smiled and walked away. The house was silent except for the soft percussion of wind through the dune grass. Morning light washed the hardwood in pale gold, gentle and unforgiving all at once. Janice moved through the rooms barefoot, the boards warm beneath her feet. Her fingertips trailed along the walls, over the old nail holes and paint seams, as if she were reading the house like Braille. Every inch of it carried her mother's touch. That first summer, decades ago, her mother had built this place with her own hands and a stubborn heart. Planks hauled from yard sales, windows scavenged from demolition sites, blue paint mixed from 3 half-empty cans. It wasn't elegant, but it was alive. Janice could still see her mother standing in the unfinished kitchen, a hammer tucked behind her ear, saying, "A woman builds her own shelter? Or she spends her life asking to be let in." Janice had been 14 then, half listening, already dreaming of some shinier world beyond the dunes. She hadn't realized those words would become the foundation under her entire life. She stopped by the mantel where old photo frames lined the shelf, some cracked, some tarnished with salt. There was one of Emily at 6 years old, missing front teeth, sand plastered to her cheeks, holding a starfish like it was treasure. Emily had called the beach house our fort. She'd loved sleeping on the porch swing and eating cereal with her toes dangling off the steps. But somewhere along the way, that joy had curdled into embarrassment. Janice remembered the first time Emily had called the place quaint. The word had landed like a bruise. Now, standing in the quiet, Janice reached for that photo. The glass was clouded, the frame slightly warped from humidity. She traced the edge of her daughter's small grin with her thumb, then carefully set the frame aside. She spent the rest of the morning gathering the old pictures, her mother hammering shingles, her father, long gone, painting trim in a faded baseball cap, birthdays with crooked cakes, family barbecues where smoke and laughter filled the air. Each one told the truth of the house before it became a battleground. By noon, a shoebox full of those memories sat on the passenger seat of her car. The Outer Banks Historical Museum was a small white building off the main road, the kind of place locals visited once a year during hurricane season to remember what they'd rebuilt. The curator, an older man named Wade, recognized Janice instantly. "Janice Holloway," he said, smiling as he wiped his hands on his vest. "Haven't seen you since the lighthouse restoration." "Brought something for your archives," she said, lifting the box. "Local build, mid-70s through early 2000s. My mother's work." Wade opened the box carefully, eyes softening as he sifted through the photos. "She built that blue bungalow on Driftwood Lane, didn't she? Everyone still talks about how she refused to hire contractors." "She said no one could pour love into a house they didn't have to live in," Janice murmured. Wade nodded, reverent. "We'll make sure these are preserved. Folks forget what real craftsmanship looks like." "Thank you," she said quietly. "That house deserves to be remembered for what it was, not what people tried to make it." When she stepped back outside, The wind carried the scent of the marsh, heavy with salt and pine. For the first time in months, the weight in her chest loosened. That evening, she returned home and stood in the entryway. The guest rules sign still hung near the door, its letters faded and uneven. Leave sand outside. Take only memories. Love the view. Janice removed it gently, set it on the table, and reached for a new plaque she'd made that afternoon at the local craft shop. The paint was still fresh. The message simple. Chosen guests only. She hung it where the old one had been and stepped back. The breeze pushed through the screen door, fluttering the edge of her robe. Outside, Sharon's SUV rolled to a stop by the gate. She climbed out, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers wrapped in brown paper. "Thought these belonged here," Sharon said, handing them over. "For the porch." Janice smiled, the faintest sheen of tears in her eyes. "You didn't have to." "Maybe not," Sharon said, glancing toward the house. "But some memories deserve witnesses." Janice placed the flowers in a mason jar on the porch railing, their scent mixed with the sea air. Clean, bright, new. As the sun sank below the horizon, the tide crept close enough to whisper against the dunes. Inside, the phone stayed silent. No calls. No apologies. Janice sank into the porch chair, listening to the hum of cicadas rising from the marsh, her hands folded loosely in her lap. Then, faintly, headlights flashed down the coastal road. Too slow for tourists, too deliberate. A car idled near her mailbox, engine humming, then reversed and disappeared into the dark. Janice's heart steadied, pulse low but strong. She leaned back, gaze fixed on the empty road, and murmured, "Go on. Keep driving." The wind picked up, rattling the chimes above her door like applause. She didn't move. She didn't flinch. The house was hers again. For now. By the next week, the stillness around the house had turned sacred. Mornings arrived soft and slow, the kind that smelled of sea air and freshly brewed coffee. Janice sat on the porch most days, reading the paper, watching her hydrangeas bloom in their salt-weathered planters. For the first time in years, she could hear herself think. Then, one morning, the peace fractured. A notification chimed on her phone. Out of habit, she checked. Emily. The post was a wedding photo, one Janice hadn't seen before. Emily stood in her Italian gown, the cliffs of Lake Como blurred behind her. But the caption read, "Perfect morning at the beach house with my forever love. Coastal bliss, your home sweet home." Janice stared at it for a long moment. 1,000 likes, heart emojis, compliments from friends about the stunning view. Except the view wasn't hers. It wasn't even real. The background had been digitally softened, the horizon reshaped to look like her shoreline. A different kind of ache crept in, not sharp this time, but heavy, dull, final. She didn't comment, didn't text, didn't call. She simply opened the settings on her phone and, one by one, blocked Emily and Derek from every platform. No theatrics, no announcements, just quiet severance. When the last app dimmed to gray, she felt something unshackled deep inside her chest. 2 days later, a low rumble rolled up the coastal road. Janice stepped onto her porch as the familiar sound of motorcycles echoed through the dunes. Clutch's group had returned, 5 bikes lined up like chrome sculptures under the sunlight. "Afternoon, Miss Janice," Clutch called, pulling off his helmet. His grin was wide, easy. She smiled, genuinely this time. "Back already?" "Couldn't stay away. The guys wanted one more ride before heading north," he said. "Figured we'd drop by and make sure we didn't scuff anything." Janice gestured toward the door. "You didn't need to, but I'm glad you did." For the next few hours, the house came alive again. The hum of voices, the faint twang of country music from a portable speaker, the smell of lemon oil and seawater as they wiped down surfaces and swept the porch. It wasn't a mess. It was a ritual, a kind of reverence. When they were done, Clutch handed her a small package wrapped in brown paper. "Little something we left behind last time," he said, eyes twinkling. Inside was a framed photo, the club gathered on the porch, sunset blazing behind them, written in black marker across the bottom. "Thanks for the peace." Janice's throat tightened. "You didn't have to—" Clutch shook his head. "Yeah, we did. You gave us a home for a minute. Not many folks would have." When they roared away an hour later, the wind carried their laughter down the road like distant thunder. That evening, Sharon stopped by with a folder of paperwork and a bottle of chilled white wine. "I found a spot for this," she said, placing the framed photo on the small table beside the front door. "Right where people can see it the second they walk in." Janice ran a finger over the glass. "It fits better than anything that's ever been there." They clinked glasses on the porch, the sea turning purple under the setting sun. For a moment, it almost felt like everything broken had finally settled into place. Then Janice's phone buzzed again. A voicemail icon blinked on the screen. No name, just a number she didn't recognize, but she knew it anyway. She pressed play. Derek's voice filled the air. Too smooth, too casual. "Janice, I'm just going to say this once. You might think you're in the clear, but we still deserve compensation. You caused emotional distress, interfered with family property, and embarrassed Emily publicly. I'd rather settle quietly, but if you force my hand, we'll go to court. Call me." The message ended with a click that sounded almost like a smirk. Janice set the phone down slowly. Her reflection caught in the dark window. Behind her, Sharon was watching. "You okay?" Janice nodded once. "He's still talking like he owns something that doesn't belong to him." "What'll you do?" Janice picked up the framed photo from the table, studying the bold scrawl. "Thanks for the peace." Then she smiled, faint and deliberate. "Keep what's mine." A gust of wind pushed through the open doorway, flipping the edge of the welcome mat. The tide was rising fast outside, waves reaching higher, closer. For a brief moment, lightning flickered far out at sea. The storm wasn't gone, it was circling back. And this time, Janice wasn't planning to take shelter. The courthouse smelled faintly of polish and old paper, like history pretending to be order. Janice adjusted the strand of pearls at her throat, the same ones she'd worn to Emily's high school graduation, back when pride had felt simple. Her linen blazer was pressed, her shoes practical, her expression calm. She wasn't dressing for intimidation, just for truth. Sharon stood beside her near the back of the courtroom, whispering, "You look like justice in pastel." Janice smiled faintly. "Let's hope the judge thinks so." At the front, Derek and Emily sat with their attorney, whispering sharply. Derek's suit was charcoal, his loafers polished within an inch of vanity. Emily wore white again, creamy, expensive, symbolic. Her hands fluttered like nervous birds, adjusting her bracelet, smoothing her skirt, tucking hair that didn't need tucking. When their eyes met across the aisle, Emily looked away first. The bailiff's voice rang out, "Walker versus Holloway, property interference claim." Neil Lawson rose from the defense table, his tan unbothered by fluorescent lighting. He gave Janice a small nod, the kind that meant follow my lead and breathe. The judge, a silver-haired woman with reading glasses perched low, took her seat and surveyed the room like she'd seen every flavor of Family Feud, and none impressed her. "Let's get this circus started," she muttered. Derek's lawyer went first, his tone rich with practiced outrage. "Your Honor, my client suffered immense emotional distress when Mrs. Holloway intentionally deprived them of use of a family property. This was not a random rental. It was targeted humiliation." Janice didn't blink. Neil scribbled something on a yellow pad. "Let him talk himself out." The lawyer continued, waving a sheaf of printed screenshots. My clients were newlyweds, seeking a peaceful honeymoon at a house they had always understood as a shared family asset. Janice's quiet voice broke the rhythm. Understood, not owned. The judge arched a brow. Mrs. Holloway, you'll have your turn. Emily stiffened beside Derek, eyes flashing. She looked less like a wronged bride and more like a cornered teenager about to start shouting in the grocery store. When the plaintiff's lawyer finally sat down, Neil stood and approached the bench with a single folder in his hand. Your Honor, my client is the sole and verified owner of the property in question. Title deed, tax records, and a fraud alert filed with county records. All in her name. What my opposing counsel calls a family asset is, in legal fact, a privately owned home. He handed over a small stack of neatly bound documents. Additionally, we have text correspondence showing explicit acknowledgement from both plaintiffs that they required permission to use the property. He nodded to Janice. Mrs. Holloway? Janice stood, every movement deliberate. She opened a second folder and placed 3 photos on the evidence table. One of the beach house deed, one of her mother hammering the frame, and one of the porch sign, chosen guests only. Her voice didn't tremble. I didn't rent the house to my daughter because she didn't ask to visit me. She asked to use it for pictures. It's not a backdrop. It's my home. The judge studied her for a moment, then turned to Emily. Anything you'd like to add, Mrs. Walker? Emily's lip trembled. Her lawyer touched her arm, whispering something, but she shook him off. She was never there for me, Emily blurted out. Never. She always chose her projects, her house, her friends over me. I just wanted a piece of what she took from me my whole life. The room went still. Janice didn't speak, didn't flinch. The silence around her was its own verdict. Finally, the judge set down her pen and sighed. Mrs. Walker, this court doesn't settle childhood grievances. The property belongs to Mrs. Holloway. She had every right to rent, lease, or withhold access as she saw fit. Case dismissed. Emily's face went white. Derek's jaw tightened. The judge glanced at Janice. Mrs. Holloway, you're entitled to recover your legal costs. Neil nodded once. Thank you, Your Honor. A faint collective exhale rippled through the gallery. Outside, the salt air hit like freedom. The sun was sharp, the kind that made everything look a little too real. Neil clasped her hand. Textbook victory. You did good. Sharon added, You did better. Janice smiled politely but didn't celebrate. She just looked toward the parking lot, where Derek and Emily stood by their sleek black SUV. Emily had turned away, shoulders shaking, but Derek's gaze found Janice's across the asphalt. He smiled, thin, venomous, and leaned closer as she passed. You'll die alone in that house, he hissed, voice low enough for only her to hear. Janice stopped. For a moment she felt the old ache surge up again, that instinct to defend herself, to explain that peace isn't loneliness. But she didn't give him that satisfaction. She turned her head just slightly and said, Calm as the tide. Better alone than rotting in company. Then she walked away, pearls catching the sunlight, the wind lifting her hair like a flag reclaimed. Behind her, Derek's laughter followed, a hollow sound swallowed by the roar of the ocean beyond the courthouse steps. Janice didn't look back. The fight was over. But the war, the one between peace and bitterness, was just beginning. The courthouse dust hadn't even settled before Janice decided to do something unexpected. Something that didn't taste like revenge or victory. It started a week later, when she drove past the Outer Banks Foster Resource Center, a weather-beaten yellow house tucked behind the Methodist church. The sign out front read, Temporary Homes, Lasting Hope. She parked, walked up the steps, and knocked. Inside, the place smelled faintly of disinfectant and crayons. A young woman at the desk looked up, startled. Can I help you? I hope so, Janice said softly. I own a beach house down the road. I'd like to offer it for a week, free of charge, to a family who needs a breather. The woman blinked, clearly not used to strangers walking in with gifts instead of requests. You mean, like a vacation stay? Janice nodded. It's quiet, safe, close to the water. Might be good for someone trying to start over. The woman smiled then, wide and genuine. We have a couple that just got approved to adopt. First-time parents. They could use a fresh start. Then it's theirs, Janice said. That weekend, a beat-up sedan rolled into her driveway. Out stepped a young couple, barely 30, with the kind of careful tenderness that comes from surviving together. The woman's belly curved under a faded cotton dress. The man carried a duffel bag and a small grocery box. Mrs. Holloway? He asked, nervous but polite. Just Janice, she said, handing them the keys. You two enjoy yourselves. No rules except respect the sea and each other. They laughed softly, thanked her a dozen times, and disappeared inside. Janice lingered on the porch for a few minutes after they went in, listening to the faint squeak of floorboards, the sound of new voices filling the rooms. It didn't hurt the way she thought it might. If anything, it felt like exhaling after years of holding her breath. 3 days later, she found a note tucked under the doormat when she went to collect her mail. The handwriting was uneven, careful. Dear Janice, we can't tell you what this week meant to us. It's been so long since we felt like we belonged anywhere. We talked about baby names while watching the sunrise from the porch. We laughed more than we have in months. The house feels like love built into wood and salt air. Thank you for trusting us with it. Amanda and Lee. At the bottom, in smaller letters, P.S. The banana bread you left in the freezer saved us on our first night here. Hope you don't mind that we finished it. Janice smiled until her eyes stung. She pressed the card to her chest, then carried it inside like it was something fragile. When Sharon stopped by later that afternoon with her usual burst of laughter and a stack of mail, Janice handed her the card. Sharon read it aloud, her voice softening halfway through. Lord, she said, shaking her head. If this doesn't make you believe in second chances? Janice laughed, blinking away the moisture at the corners of her eyes. Frame it. Put it next to the biker's photo. You sure? I want every kind of love that's touched this house in one place, Janice said. Proof that it still gives back. Sharon framed it that evening. The two photos, Clutch's crew grinning against the sunset and the handwritten note from Amanda and Lee, sat side by the front door, like matching testaments to kindness earned, not demanded. The next morning, her phone buzzed with a text from an unfamiliar number. Clutch, guess who just walked the stage today? Attached was a photo, his daughter cap and gown, smiling with the same wild confidence he carried on his bike. Clutch, she says to tell you thanks. Wouldn't have made it without people who believed she was worth fighting for. Janice stared at the message for a long time, a lump forming in her throat. Then she typed back, Janice, you tell her she built her own shelter. I just handed her a hammer. The reply came back with a string of laughing emojis and one word, Amen. That evening, Janice baked banana bread again, the same recipe her mother had taught her decades ago. The smell filled the kitchen, warm and heavy with memory. She took a slice out to the porch, the sky streaked pink and gold, waves folding gently against the shore. Her dog, an old mutt she'd adopted after her husband died, lay curled at her feet, snoring softly. Janice sat back, letting the sea wind brush her face. She didn't check her phone, didn't wait for messages. Instead, she whispered into the dusk, they'll never understand love like this. The horizon glowed like a promise, distant, steady, infinite. Then, from down the road, a car slowed in front of her gate. The same black SUV. It idled for a beat too long, headlights burning through the twilight. Janice didn't move. She just took another bite of banana bread, the sweet warmth grounding her, and whispered, "Keep driving, Derek." The SUV rolled on, swallowed by the dark. And the waves kept singing. The cemetery sat on a rise just past the old bridge, its rows of weathered stones overlooking the sound. Gulls wheeled overhead, calling into the salt-heavy wind, their cries lost among the whisper of pines. Janice hadn't been here in over a decade. She parked by the fence and sat for a long while, engine ticking as it cooled, the radio whispering static from some distant station. She wasn't sure why she'd come. Closure was a myth she'd stopped chasing years ago, but lately, silence had begun to sound a lot like unfinished business. She finally stepped out, gravel crunching under her shoes. The path to his grave was lined with broken shells and wild grass. Thomas Holloway, 1958-2003. The headstone was plain. Just his name, 2 dates, and a phrase that had never fit him. Forever in our hearts. Janice crouched beside it, brushing off dried pine needles. Her reflection wavered in the granite, older now, steadier, unrecognizable to the woman who'd once stood trembling beside this very plot, with Emily clinging to her hand. "Hello, Tom," she said quietly. "I see you're still taking up space." The words came without venom, more observation than accusation. She traced the carved letters, remembering the years when even his name had carried the weight of survival. The yelling, the slammed doors, the overdraft notices, the slow erosion of self that had left her small enough to fit inside his temper. She remembered how he used to mock the house before it was built. "A beach cottage? We can't even pay for heat. And you want shingles and salt air?" And how he'd laughed when she told him she'd finish it herself someday. When the debt collectors came after his business failed, he'd left her with the wreckage. When he died, the insurance money barely covered the arrears. It had taken 15 years to crawl out from under what he'd left behind. 15 years to make the Holloway name mean something other than fear. She looked toward the horizon, the shimmer of water visible through the trees. "I paid off your debts," she said softly. "Everyone. I kept the house. I raised our daughter. You'd call that stubborn. I call it surviving." The wind kicked up, scattering sand across the headstones. She didn't move. "You'd probably say Emily turned out just like you," she murmured. "But I protected her from you, Tom. I made sure she never saw the shouting, the bruises, the bank letters. I wanted her to believe her father was decent. Turns out lies can rot a person even when they're told out of love." Her voice cracked on the last word. She straightened, brushed her knees, and stood over the grave one final time. "You don't get to own the ending," she said. "Not anymore." Then she turned and walked away. Back home, the storm clouds that had been gathering all day finally opened up, drumming against the windows. Janice sat at her kitchen table with her laptop open, a blank document staring back. She typed a title before she could talk herself out of it. "The House My Ex Couldn't Ruin." The words came slow at first, like water finding its channel. She wrote about the years she spent scraping by, about the house she built with her mother's hands and her own persistence, about the debts and bruises that didn't show on bank statements, about how legacy isn't what you inherit, it's what you repair. She didn't mention Emily by name, she didn't have to. The story wasn't about blame. It was about endurance. When she finished, she read it twice. Then she sent it to Coastal Carolina Living, a small regional publication that often printed essays about local history and community resilience. She didn't expect a reply, but 3 days later, one arrived. "Ms. Holloway, your piece is powerful, honest, and beautifully written. We'd be honored to feature it in next month's issue." Janice stared at the email, heart thudding softly against her ribs. She hadn't realized until that moment how much she'd been waiting to be heard. When the story went live 2 weeks later, it started small. A few shares from locals, a comment from the museum curator calling her mother's craftsmanship a legacy of grit. Then came messages from women she'd never met. I left too. You made me feel less ashamed. Thank you for saying what we can't. Janice read every word, sitting at her porch table with her laptop glowing in the dark. She didn't reply to most of them. She didn't need to. The waves below her carried the sound of release, of something ending cleanly. Then, late one evening, a new message arrived. From an address she didn't recognize. Subject line: You made me look like a monster. The name beneath it stopped her cold. Emily. Janice's fingers hovered over the keyboard, the cursor blinking like a dare. Outside, lightning flashed over the water and the power flickered just once before steadying. She didn't open the message. Not yet. She just whispered to the sea, "Not tonight," and closed the laptop. The storm would wait until morning. The morning after the storm. Sunlight spilled across Janice's porch, like forgiveness. The sea was calm again, deceptively so. Waves smoothing themselves out as if nothing had ever been unsettled. Inside, her laptop chimed with new messages. Dozens of them. Her essay had found its way beyond the coast. Women from across the country were writing to her. Teachers, nurses, retirees, single mothers, each with a piece of their own history folded into hers. You reminded me what survival looks like. I wish my daughter understood the strength you showed. You gave me permission to start over. Janice read every one. Some made her cry. Others made her laugh in disbelief at how familiar pain could sound in a stranger's words. But one message stood out. Ms. Holloway, my name is Maria Coleman. I run the Lighthouse Women's Shelter downtown. Your story's been circulating among our residents, and they're calling you an inspiration. Would you consider speaking at our monthly meeting? Just to share what rebuilding looks like? Janice stared at the message, her coffee cooling beside her. Public speaking wasn't her idea of comfort, but maybe comfort wasn't the point anymore. A week later, she found herself standing at a podium in a converted church hall, facing 30 women seated in folding chairs. The air smelled faintly of coffee, chalk dust, and courage. Maria introduced her as a woman who built her own second chance. Janice smiled shyly, her notes trembling slightly in her hands. I'm not a speaker, she began. I'm a builder. Sometimes with wood, sometimes with patience. Both require sanding down what hurts. That earned a soft laugh from the audience. She talked about her mother, about the house, about the debts that nearly buried her, and the silence that almost did. She talked about the difference between leaving someone and finally walking back to yourself. When she finished, the room was quiet, not out of pity, but recognition. A woman in the front row raised her hand. Did you ever forgive him? Or her? Janice thought for a long moment. Forgiveness, she said slowly, isn't something I owe anyone. It's something I give myself when I stop carrying their story. The room broke into gentle applause. As she stepped down, Maria clasped her hands. You didn't just rebuild a house, she said. You rebuilt the idea of one. That night, Janice drove home under a sky smeared with stars. She parked by the beach and walked down to the shoreline barefoot, the wet sand cold against her feet. The sea hissed and retreated, its rhythm steady, familiar. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She didn't want to look, but curiosity won. Emily, a public post this time. A screenshot of the essay, her own mother's words highlighted in bitter red. The caption read, "Some people rewrite history to feel better about abandoning it." The comments were predictable. Sympathy emojis. Acquaintances offering shallow comfort. Derek chiming in beneath one of them. She's always been good at pretending she's the victim. Janice felt something deep in her chest crack, not with pain this time, but with clarity. She called Sharon. Her friend answered on the first ring. "I saw the post," Sharon said immediately. "You okay?" "She's spiraling," Janice said, her voice calm. "But I'm not saving her." There was silence, then Sharon's sigh of approval. "Good. She made her bed of hashtags. Let her sleep in it." Janice smiled despite herself. "You always did have a way with words. I learned from you." The next morning, Janice sat at her dining table with a pen, a stack of documents, and a cup of black coffee. The ocean was visible through the window. Silver. Endless. The will took less than an hour to update. Beneficiary: the Outer Banks Foster Resource Center. Secondary beneficiary: the Lighthouse Women's Shelter. Property description: one single-family home, fully paid, to be used for rest, refuge, or rebuilding. When Neil arrived later to review the paperwork, he flipped through each page carefully, nodding. "You sure about this?" he asked. "No going back once it's filed." "I've been sure for a long time," Janice said. "This house outlived its ghosts. I want it to outlive me, too." Neil leaned back, studying her. "You know, most people spend their lives trying to keep what's theirs. You just keep finding ways to give it away." Janice smiled, faint but firm. "That's how I keep it mine." He signed the witness line, slid the papers into his briefcase, and stood. "You're something else, Janice Holloway." She watched him leave, then turned back toward the window. The tide had crept high again, foamy and full, licking at the base of the dunes. Her reflection in the glass looked steady, weathered, free. The world outside was moving, rising. And somewhere beneath that calm surface, a ripple waited. Small, unseen, inevitable. Because letting go of ownership never stopped people from trying to take what wasn't theirs. By late summer, the air on the coast had shifted. Heavier, richer. That in-between season where tourists thinned and locals took the beach back for themselves. Janice stood on her porch, the ocean glinting steel blue beyond the dunes, a mug of coffee warming her palms. The house looked different now, lighter somehow, stripped of ghosts and grievances. She'd already given away more than she'd ever kept. But there was one final thing left to do: make sure her peace wasn't temporary. At Sharon's real estate office, the smell of fresh paint and printer toner greeted her. Sharon glanced up from her desk, eyes flicking over Janice's neatly pressed blazer and calm expression. "All right," Sharon said, leaning back. "Tell me what you're cooking up. That look on your face says revenge with a lease agreement." Janice laughed softly. "Close. I want to list the house again. Long-term this time. Not to family. Not to friends. Just someone who'll respect it." Sharon tilted her head. "You sure you want to let it go like that? You fought harder for this place than anyone I've ever met." "I'm not letting it go," Janice said, her voice steady. "I'm protecting it from ever falling into the wrong hands again." That was enough for Sharon. She opened a file, typed in the listing description, and smiled. "Let's see who the world sends your way." It didn't take long. 2 weeks later, a local veterans outreach group reached out, a nonprofit that provided long-term coastal retreats for recovering service members and their families. Their representative, a polite man with a cane and an easy smile, shook Janice's hand on the porch. "We can cover a full-year lease," he said. "You'll barely notice us. We take care of our spaces." "That's all I ask," Janice said. When the papers were signed, Sharon stood on the steps, holding a bottle of cheap champagne. "To stability," she said, popping the cork, "and to renters who know gratitude when they see it." Janice laughed, genuinely. "I'll drink to that." They toasted in the evening light, the waves rolling in rhythm below them. For once, peace didn't feel fragile. It felt earned. The first thing the veterans group did after moving in was repaint the porch. They sent Janice a photo, the boards gleaming in clean stripes of red, white, and blue. Patriotic, bright, and just a touch ironic. Emily's favorite color combination. Sharon had to bite back a grin when she showed the photo to Janice. "You couldn't have scripted it better." "I didn't have to," Janice said, a slow smile curving her lips. "The universe still has a sense of humor." That weekend, Janice sat with Neil at her kitchen table, going over one last stack of documents. He tapped his pen against the folder. "These are all your accounts. Checking, savings, life insurance, the rest. Are you sure you want to remove your daughter entirely?" Janice nodded. "Everyone. She's built her future on borrowed things. I won't let this house, or anything tied to it, become one of them." Neil signed off with quiet respect. "It's done. You're a fortress, Janice." "Not a fortress," she said softly, watching gulls drift over the surf. "Just a foundation that doesn't crack anymore." That same week, she boxed up her old wedding china, ivory with blue trim, delicate, once precious, and carried it to Clutch's new biker cafe, a sun-drenched spot off Highway 12. The place was loud with music and laughter, walls lined with license plates and Polaroids. Clutch was behind the counter, towel over his shoulder. "Miss Janice," he called. "You come to try the ribs or to rescue me from my own coffee machine?" She set the box on the counter. "Neither. Thought your cafe could use some history." He unwrapped one of the plates, tracing the faded floral edge. "This is fancy. It's survived enough dinner fights and bad toasts to deserve a second life," she said. "Serve pie on it, or fries, whatever feels right." Clutch grinned. "You sure?" "I'm sure." He lifted one of the plates like a trophy. "Then consider this donation the classiest rebellion we've ever seen." Sharon, sitting nearby, raised her soda can. "That's how you salt the earth, Janice." Janice clinked her glass against it. "And plant something better on top." For a few blissful weeks, the quiet held, until Sharon called one morning, her voice carrying both irritation and disbelief. "You're not going to like this," she said. "Someone just tried to book the house online through one of the property sites I deactivated months ago. I only caught it because the inquiry pinged my personal email." Janice frowned. "Who was it?" "The name used was Lauren Peters. No profile photo. Payment attempted with an expired card. But the contact number?" Sharon paused, lowering her voice. "Charlotte area code. Same as Emily's." Janice felt her pulse steady instead of spike. "She's still playing games." "She doesn't quit, does she?" "No," Janice said, walking to the porch window. The veterans group flag fluttered over the new paint job. "But neither do I." Outside, the tide was rolling in again, slow, patient, unstoppable. She set her coffee cup down, her reflection solid in the glass. "Let her come," Janice said. "The locks have changed." The wind rose, rattling the window panes like applause. The email came just after sunrise, time-stamped 6:07 a.m. Subject: booking confirmation, Driftwood Cottage, Lauren Peters. Janice sipped her coffee, eyes narrowing. The tone of the automated message was cheerful, oblivious. "We're thrilled to confirm your stay at Driftwood Cottage." The fake listing still mirrored her old property description word for word, down to the photo of her porch swing. She didn't even have to guess who was behind it. "Nice try, sweetheart," she muttered, closing the laptop. Instead of deleting it, she printed the email and set it beside her breakfast plate. The black text gleamed faintly under the morning light, absurdly official. Then she reached for her phone. Sharon answered on the second ring, voice still groggy. "If this is about muffins, I'm not up yet." "It's not muffins," Janice said. "It's a ghost booking." That woke Sharon up fast. "Don't tell me, Lauren Peters?" Janice smiled. "Bingo." Sharon's sigh was audible even through the static. She's really making this her part-time job, huh? Apparently. All right, Sharon said, the clatter of typing filling the line. Give me 10 minutes. I'll pull the records from the site. We'll cancel the booking and blacklist the name, number, and card. Hell, I'll even flag the IP address if I can find it. Good, Janice said. Make sure she knows she never even got close. Oh, she'll know, Sharon promised. She'll get an official notice of cancellation. No refund because, well, there wasn't a charge. Just embarrassment. Janice grinned, a quiet satisfaction blooming behind her ribs. That's the best kind of return policy. By noon, Sharon sent her a screenshot. Booking canceled. User blacklisted. Janice stared at it for a long time before forwarding the automated message to Emily's email. No explanation, no subject line, just one sentence typed beneath it. Nice try. The reply came faster than she expected, less than 10 minutes later. Emily, I hope it burns. Janice stared at the words, small and venomous, glowing white against her screen. She didn't respond, didn't even sigh. She just closed the email, turned off her Wi-Fi, and looked around her kitchen. The morning light was clean, unflinching, falling over her mother's old measuring spoons hanging by the window, the new lease folder still sitting on the counter, and the framed photos by the door. The house wasn't just hers. It was everyone who'd learned peace inside its walls, and she intended to keep it that way. That afternoon, Janice drove into town to meet a local contractor, a broad-shouldered man with a salt-and-pepper beard and a voice that carried calm authority. I heard you're looking to add a few modern touches, he said, flipping open his clipboard. Security touches, Janice corrected. They walked the perimeter of the property together, the gate, the deck, the side path that led through the dune grass. I want motion-activated cameras at every entry point, Janice said. Night vision, audio feed to my phone, discreet, but visible enough to be a warning. He nodded. You got it. Anything else? Yes. She pointed to the front gate. I want a coded lock. Keypad entry. Only the veterans group Sharon and I get the code. The man whistled low. You expecting trouble? Janice smiled faintly. Just closing unfinished doors. By the end of the week, the system was live. Cameras blinked silently under the eaves. The gate beeped when she keyed in her new access code. She stood in the driveway as the contractor packed up, the air humming faintly with sea wind and satisfaction. When he left, she took out the small leather-bound guest book she kept in the entryway, a tradition her mother had started decades ago. Each page was filled with the handwriting of visitors who'd stayed there over the years. Friends, travelers, the biker crew, the foster couple. Janice flipped to a blank page near the back. She picked up a pen and wrote carefully, her script deliberate and clean. This home knows who belongs. She set the book on the console table beneath the framed photographs. The bikers, the thank you note, the veterans group flag. Together, they made a shrine not to revenge, but reclamation. That night, the ocean wind howled low through the dunes, rattling the chimes above the porch. Janice sat in her usual chair with her dog at her feet, the glow from the porch light casting a halo over her coffee cup. For the first time in years, she felt completely safe. Then, faintly, headlights flickered down the road again. Slow, deliberate, pausing at the edge of her property before disappearing. Her phone buzzed once, the new camera alert flashing across her screen. Motion detected. Front gate. Janice glanced at the live feed. The gate stood closed, untouched, the sand around it undisturbed. The headlights were already gone. She exhaled through her nose, not fear, just steady, quiet control. She reached for her journal, turned to a new page and wrote 4 words before closing it again. Peace takes maintenance too. Outside, the sea kept rising, whispering against the shore. The door stayed locked, and Janice, finally, slept through the night. The late September air was cool enough to carry a whisper of autumn, but the sea still looked like summer. Blue, restless, alive. Janice sat on her porch, a blanket draped across her lap, her dog dozing at her feet. The waves crashed steady and rhythmic beyond the dunes, a sound that had become her favorite kind of silence. 2 houses down, laughter drifted over the breeze. The veterans group had gathered again for a weekend barbecue, the scent of charcoal and cedar smoke mixing with the salt air. Someone was playing old country music on a speaker. It fit, the sound of resilience, of people who'd survived worse and learned how to live anyway. Janice smiled, listening. The sound didn't intrude. It harmonized. For once, she didn't feel like she was on the outside of joy looking in. Her dog, old, gray, loyal, stretched and snorted, tail thumping lazily against the deckboards. "Don't worry," she murmured, reaching down to scratch his ears. "We earned this quiet." A car door closed out front. Tires crunched over gravel. Sharon appeared at the gate, waving a rectangular bundle wrapped in brown paper. "You ready for your daily delivery of trouble?" "Depends," Janice called back. "Does it bark or bill me?" "Neither," Sharon said, climbing the steps. She unwrapped the paper and handed over a black frame. Inside it was the article, "The House My Ex Couldn't Ruin," reprinted from Coastal Carolina Living. The layout elegant and clean. The editor had added a short tagline beneath her byline, "On surviving the storms you didn't choose." Janice's throat tightened. "You didn't have to do that." Sharon shrugged. "You've done plenty for everyone else. Call this a housewarming gift. For the piece you finally bought." Janice ran her fingers along the edge of the frame. "I didn't buy it," she said quietly. "I earned it. Inch by inch." They sat for a while, side by side, the kind of silence that belonged only to old friends who no longer needed to fill the gaps. "Neil says the veterans love the place," Sharon said finally. "They're talking about keeping the lease for another year." Janice nodded. "Good. Houses like consistency. So do I." "Any more ghost bookings from your favorite Charlotte area code?" "None," Janice said. Her tone was soft, but the smile behind it was sharp. "Even ghosts get tired of locked doors." Sharon chuckled, rising to go. "You did it, you know." "Did what?" "Salted the earth, and grew something worth tending." Janice looked out at the water, where the horizon glowed orange against the descending sun. "I guess that's the trick. You can't grow peace in soil that still remembers fear." Sharon pressed a kiss to her cheek. "Keep reminding the rest of us." When she left, Janice stayed on the porch, holding the framed article against her knees. The paper caught the fading light, gleaming faintly like a mirror of everything she'd survived. Her phone buzzed. Clutch. "Still owe you that tattoo discount. You want chosen guests only on your arm or across your heart?" Janice laughed, shaking her head. She typed back, "Across the porch is enough." Another ping came through. A photo this time. Clutch standing in his cafe kitchen, holding up one of her old china plates. On it was a slab of pie, flaky and golden. Caption, "Best pie on the coast, courtesy of Miss Janice's Rebellion dishware." She smiled until her cheeks hurt. Then she set the phone down, leaned back, and let the laughter 2 doors down wash over her. A young couple she hadn't met before, guests of the veterans group, walked hand in hand along the path toward the dunes, barefoot, their laughter echoing faintly against the sea. They paused by her fence, waved shyly, and kept walking. Janice waved back. For the first time in a long time, the sight didn't twist something in her chest. It loosened it. She reached for her journal, the same one that had carried her thoughts through storms and silence alike, and wrote, "I didn't lose a daughter. I reclaimed a home. Her handwriting wavered slightly from the wind. She read the line twice, then closed the book with quiet finality. The horizon was a strip of molten gold now. The veteran's laughter rolled down the beach like a tide that didn't take. It returned. Janice leaned back in her chair, her dog sighing contentedly at her feet. Funny, she murmured to the sea. She wanted my beach house for a honeymoon. A smile spread, slow and knowing. I gave it to a biker club instead. The waves roared their approval, steady and endless. The porch light flickered on, casting everything in a warm glow. And for the first time, peace didn't feel borrowed. It felt permanent.